Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we have a great show for you today. I'm your host, Ben Crossman. Thank you again for joining us here on Computer America. Hope you're all well and you are ready for some, Mike Cermak. He's a longtime correspondent. Always have a lot of fun talking to him, and you can be sure today's show is going to be another great one. So before we start talking to Mike and everything that we have to discuss, a few things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from podcasts, show notes, videos, articles, just everything that we do here on the program can be found in the old-fashioned way of reading it on your own time at computeramerica.com. Also, again, in the show notes, you'll get things like links to any articles that we do today, links to our guest website, techguide.org, and just, a cornucopia of information that you should know about. The next is the video portion where you can watch Computer America, not just listen. It's a lot of fun, another way to experience the show. Not mandatory. We try to make everything as audio friendly as possible. Not saying that we're going to switch over strictly, but hey, it's something, something that you should probably try once. And then the last thing is the contest, which we had a winner this past Friday. And we'll be having another one this upcoming Friday from our friends over at Logitech, giving away the M720 Triathlon mouse. Single mouse, control up to 3 different devices. It's all works by Bluetooth. It's really, really cool. And again, give that away every single Friday. So, intro done short. I think we're going to jump into our interview. And again, for any long-term listeners out there, you'll know that this is one of our longest-running correspondents. Always fun to talk to him. And Mr. Mike Cermak. Mike, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ben?
Not too shabby. Just drank a cup of coffee, and oh boy, I'm feeling it. It's feeling good. But
I'm gonna grab one of my 5-hour energies here.
I love those things. Like, they're like a shot, and then you can go on. You keep doing what you're doing. It's just I'm afraid that the heart attacks I experience while taking them aren't normal, or maybe they are.
Yeah, no, they're perfectly normal. I experience them as well.
Okay,
nothing to worry about.
Good. So yeah, I'll keep chugging those instead of sleeping. That's healthy. All right. So yeah, welcome back onto Computer America, and it's been a little while. It's been a month, and a lot of things have happened, that we kind of want your comments on. For anyone, kind of interested in what we're going to talk about later on in the program, definitely want to touch on some iPhone 8 rumors, and they call it iPhone 8. I swear there's going to be like an S in between. But, some iPhone rumors. We're going to talk about these voting machines that were hacked at DEF CON. We just had David Perry join us from Vegas live at DEF CON. And
right on.
Yeah, and those voting machines are getting a lot of news. So we're going to talk about those. And IBM also, kind of makes data storage, crazy easy. But no, things like that. But before we do that, we have a few things from, Tesla, Hyperloop One. I mean, these are, one's kind of futuristic. I mean, the Hyperloop One is pretty interesting. But the Model 3... it's a day that I think a lot of people were hoping it would come a lot sooner, but happy that it's finally here. So why not start off with one of our favorites, and that is, of course, the Model 3. What's happening?
Yeah, of course. Well, we've been talking about Tesla for a long time, and the biggest complaint I hear from people whenever I talk about Tesla is that they're just too darn expensive. For some reason, not everyone wants to drop 70 or 80 or 90 or 100 grand on a car.
Yeah.
Go figure. And so the Model 3, the big selling point for that is that this is supposed to be a much more mass market vehicle and starts at $35,000 before any tax rebates or grants or anything like that. So that's much more competitive. I mean, a $35,000 brand new car with that type of technology is pretty darn reasonable. The only minor issue is that if you want one now, you have to go get in line behind 400,000 of your best friends because they've received, we estimate, over 400,000 reservations. People who've actually put down $1,000 to get in line to buy one.
Hmm.
But so if you want one, you can go in and put your money down to get on a reservation list, but it'll probably be a year or more before you actually receive one.
Right.
But what's nice about the Model 3 is it's very, very similar to the Model S, the sedan. It's a little bit smaller, but it kind of has similar styling. I've had some people look at it and say it looks just like a Model S. That you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. It's clearly smaller, but it's still sexy looking. I expected before they released the Model 3 and what it was going to look like a year ago, I thought for sure it was going to be uglified a little bit, made to look a little bit more like a Prius or something else. And don't get me wrong, I owned a Prius, but it doesn't have the sexy curves of a Tesla, but just for the sake of differentiating their products, if nothing else, I thought that they would not make it near as sexy, but they have. It looks great.
Yeah.
And it goes over 200 miles on one charge, 5-seater, still has some a little bit of frunk space up front and trunk in the back instead of a hatch, but and all the hardware to be able to do autopilot.
And that was the important thing that that Musk wanted to make sure of, was that I think he knew that if he didn't, there'd be that kind of anxiety when you purchase one of these cars, that you're going to miss out on some of the best features of a Tesla if you buy in too early. So I think he wanted the hardware and the sensors and the cameras in there as soon as possible, so that hey, self-driving is a possibility down the road. It's
and they have gone over and above about the computing power that's in this thing to make it capable to do true self-driving in the future, to the point where they're going to make the Tesla network, which is going to be basically an on-call, car service a la Uber, but without a driver.
Yeah.
So you can rent out your Tesla and it'll just drive down the road and pick up Ben and then drive back and drop him off. And they've thought about this to the extent that it was just discovered that there's actually an interior facing camera in the Tesla Model 3. They haven't really announced that, but it's been discovered. People who have them and have been looking at them, there's that camera facing toward the inside near the rearview mirror. And the speculation is that that has to do with when it's being rented out to third parties. You can keep an eye on people.
Right. There's that, and I mean, fun fact. This doesn't really involve other the passenger service, but the computing power of the Model 3 and really Teslas in general. Again, talking to David Perry, I guess Tesla hand delivered one of their vehicles to DEF CON to have it hacked and to kind of find vulnerabilities and things like that. Yeah, I know, it was really cool of them. And they said, yeah, here you go, guys, have free reign. And yeah, I guess all the geeks had a lot of fun taking apart the 24 separate computers that make up a Tesla vehicle. It's pretty crazy. I mean, to say these things are over-engineered, it's probably for obviously, an important purpose, but they are very complex. And so I guess a roundabout way to bring this back is, even in the Model 3, that's why it's kind of amazing that even if it hits a mid-range price point at $35,000, it's still, probably one of the more advanced cars at that price point, by a mile.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm there's no doubt about that. And the thing that a lot of people don't think of is, with a self-driving capability, you need redundancy as well. So those 24 computers, you need that because you don't want your life in the hands of a computer that's going to crash or misread something.
Yeah.
They have multiple computers doing the same job just for the purposes of redundancy, just to make sure it works, the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, you don't want your sensor computer, glitching out and stalling, which then causes you to drive off the road. No, you definitely want that kind of thing.
That's bad press for Tesla. No, they don't want.
and it's happened, but Tesla also has that little black box that kind of has gotten them out of hot water, a dozen times so far, where people say that the self-parking feature ram me into the side of a building. And they're like, no, you press the gas instead of the brake, and we have proof of it. Like
Right.
people are so ready to put the blame on someone else, to not make them look foolish. But so, and getting back to if you're watching the video portion, we have the website up there, looking at the two different models. I mean, and it was kind of funny because did you happen to catch I think it was either last Friday or the Friday before last, was the Model 3 event where I guess Tesla was
that's right.
there, they flew everyone out, and they kind of let people pick them up. I mean, did you catch that? What was that all about?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was a big disappointment for most people. There was no surprise announcement. There was no, mention of any other, features or anything going on in the future. The only thing we did find out is that the first rollout of cars is going to be $49,000 and will be the higher range one. Those are the ones that can go 320 miles in one charge.
335. 335.
335.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep, I stand corrected. And the lower end, the 220-mile one, which still 220 miles on one charge is not bad.
Yeah.
The lower end model, they're not going to start rolling out until next year. So it's but there were no surprises. And the thing that was also kind of a disappointment, they did the first deliveries. That's the big story. The headline is that the first Model 3s have been delivered, which is 30 of them to employees of Tesla. So that, some people, that rubbed them the wrong way. That, I like what Tesla's doing. They're trying to reward those people who are working to make this thing actually happen. But it does feel a little bit strange.
I mean,
that
to be fair, probably before the list was made, they probably had an internal system in place where it's like, hey, we're about to roll this out to the public. If you'd like to sign up, employee benefits. It happens in every company.
It does.
So maybe they were technically first, but maybe they could have done a lottery system. But just for the first.
Well,
30,
and they may
I don't
have,
know.
for all we know. They may have had thousands of employees who wanted the Model 3, and maybe they did a lottery system to see who would get to be first in line for it. But that didn't bother me that much. And on the other hand, what do you want them to do? The first 30 of them, well, the first 50 of them to roll off the assembly line have come out. 20 of them are going to Tesla engineering. 30 of them are being delivered to Tesla employees, or have been delivered to Tesla employees. And those are the ones you want to be in the hands of the employees anyway, right? Those are going to be the ones that are going to be have the most bugs in them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first 50 of any new technology rolling off the line. The first, 50 iPhone 8s to come off the line. You don't want to be the first guy to hold one. You don't want to be the first guy to buy one.
And it's kind of funny because I heard this mentioned, kind of after the fact. Was someone looked at the videos, and I guess there were a number of different upgrades that you could purchase with the vehicle. Not just extended range, but things like 19-inch rims instead of 18-inch rims. Just little things. And they said that only one Tesla out of the 30 that were delivered had the stock rims, the 18-inch wheels instead of the upgraded 19. So it sounds like the first 30, and you've kind of gone through this. I mean, how attractive are the add-ons? Because I guess like most cars, the base price isn't exactly the car that you dreamed of.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the nice thing with the Tesla Model 3, Elon mentioned when they first, came up with it, is that even at base price, it's still going to be an awesome car. And I think that's true. I mean, I'm not a car guy, so different types of rims don't really do much for me personally. The longer range is nice if you do, road trips. I'd be interested in that. The performance stuff doesn't do much for me. I'm not a racing kind of guy. But, and then there's other temptations. With the Model S, there's a lot of other variations that they're not doing in the Model 3s because they're trying to keep them as simple as possible. They have many more interior options and color options for the Model S than what they say they'll have for the Model 3. They have, different sound systems and all sorts of, performance options you can get for the Model S. So they're trying to keep the number of SKUs down for the Model 3 just to be able to keep production going as quickly as possible and as simple as possible.
They're working on
then
that,
the other
yeah.
part of it is the autopilot system. All of them will have the hardware to be able to do autopilot, and it'll just be a matter of whether or not you want to pay to turn that feature on.
Right.
And so that is an upgrade. The autopilot hardware is in it, but to actually use it, you have to pay much like a software license fee, a one-time fee to have it turned on, which helps to pay for all of that engineering and programming that makes it possible.
That's one thing that always rubbed Craig the wrong way, was that you pay for the hardware, it's the exact same hardware, but then you
Yep.
have to pay more to essentially unlock the features of your car that you already purchased. And it's expected in the in the computer world, and I guess for cars though it's something new, and it doesn't sound like there's a lot of, at least there's not a lot of vocal. Maybe because no one has the cars yet. Maybe because they haven't delivered to their entire, waiting list yet. But so far, not a lot of pushback on that.
Yeah, well, and there was a time when there were some Model S's that were delivered with, I think it was a 60 kilowatt hour battery, but in fact in it was a 75 kilowatt hour battery. It was
Yeah,
just software limited, so you could only use the part of the battery you paid for, and you could pay extra to then release the rest of the battery. And a lot of people were very upset about that. And it's like, just if you got what you paid for, and if you want more, you can get it. I don't. And like you said, it's not unusual in the software industry. You look at licenses for servers that are, per user. It's
hmm
exactly the same software, no matter if you have a small company with 10 users or a huge company with 1,000 users. But obviously, the engineering costs, they need the bigger company to pay a larger portion of that.
right.
So, I mean, it makes sense to me if you're, anyhow.
Yeah,
So, no,
it's
I think it's very fair, but there are people who that rubs them the wrong way, because the factor of the cost is not just having the physical hardware. Like, having those sensors attached to your car is great, and the sensors aren't cheap necessarily, but really the expense is the brains of the people who can make those sensors do something.
right.
That's what you're paying for.
And at the same time, I think little moves like that, and we're going to move on from the Model 3 because, like I think Elon Musk said himself, and there's been a lot of reports that they're hoping to ramp up production here in the next year or two, to really catch up. But I think like even their top end, please correct me on the number, but I think it was like 500,000 a year of the Model 3s he's hoping to produce, which is still, way less than mainstream car manufacturing companies. So, you're still looking at a couple years out if you're hoping to, buy one get one the same day. It's a little bit more than that. But no, my last point, which I kind of lost it in there, was, yeah, I completely lost my point. So, anyways,
Well, but you're absolutely
go
right.
ahead.
Just for comparison, Ford built about 2.5 million cars last year. So, building, 300, 400, even 500,000 cars is small compared to Ford, but not minuscule. I mean, it's still
Oh,
significant.
that's the point I was going to make.
And
What was
and Ford has been
go ahead.
around for a little while too.
A few years. They've been out for a few years. I remember my great grandfather had one. Way back when. But yeah, so yeah, they've been around for a while. My point was that little paying upgrades, like that was the fact, and that was too many grades. But anyways, was the fact that Tesla did something that so few other companies, including Ford, including Volkswagen, including Toyota, did, and that's they made electric cars profitable. They made them, an actual investment and worth investing in. So, maybe as much as you don't like paying to unlock capabilities that are already in the hardware, you can at least admit that without little tweaks like that, paying for premium features, that's kind of the only way that Tesla did something that, we saw like a Faraday future, and a lot of other companies have tried to do, and that's stay solvent and, not collapse under the weight of having to research all this technology because it's expensive. It's impressive.
And no one, everyone said it couldn't be done. No one expected Tesla to get to this day where they're actually selling $35,000 electric cars. I mean, it
Right.
just that can go over 200 miles and can drive on their own. I
Yeah.
think 5-10 years ago, people would have and did laugh at them for dreaming even part of that.
And here we are. So moving on from Tesla, but to another project that Elon did have a hand in, although, it just goes to show that, and like I've read reviews of biographies. I haven't, sat down and actually read one yet, but I hear that Elon is kind of this guy that just keeps going and going and going, and he shoots ideas out left and right. I'm sure more of his ideas are failures than winners, but hey, he's at least thinking and talking to people and coming up with ideas. And here's one that he had a hands-off approach to, but it seems to be making at least a little bit of headway. And that is Hyperloop One. And I believe it just came from today, where they just had, I don't want to say their autoplay video. Don't want to say that they had their first test, but they had a test that is pretty promising. So what caught you about this story?
Yeah, well, Hyperloop is kind of an amazing thing. This is the Hyperloop system. The idea there is that it's in a vacuum tube, kind of like the tube that sucks your money over into the bank when you go to the drive-up teller machines, and as a result, it takes much less energy to send something through a vacuum, with no resistance.
Right.
But they're doing it at a huge scale. So instead of a tube that goes from you to your bank teller, it's going to go miles and miles and miles, and they put you in the tube. So this first test is 300 meters long and had a top speed of 192 miles per hour.
That's pretty fast. Again, not the fastest, but that's really fast.
Yeah, and they intend to make it even faster yet, of course. This is just, initial testing for it, but holy cow. I mean, you could imagine how, efficient that can be. I mean, not only is it going to be fast, but efficient, by not having to worry about that resistance of the air when they're shoving you through the tube.
It's and I guess the main takeaway that I kind of got from this, and others have kind of mentioned, and again, if you're watching the video portion, we're showing the video of them actually testing it. I mean, they could have made this thing more futuristic. Like they even looks like LEDs are all over the thing. So, but one of the things is that this isn't as impressive as I think the next test is. I mean, the first test was they reached 90 miles an hour and they showed that everything didn't shatter like a bunch of Legos. That was great. Now they've bumped it up to 200 miles an hour, which is still pretty good. I think the next one is going to be the most important because we already have, in Japan and in Europe, we have magnetic levitation trains that already hit 250 miles an hour without the vacuum. So I think the next test, if they get over 250, if they, really make it the fastest form of land travel, that's the exciting part. I mean, cool that this worked, but I think the very next one.
And they're aiming for 700 miles per hour, if memory serves.
Yeah, something like
it's
that.
just, yeah, that's really fast.
It's let's see, someone said it was 10 miles an hour less than the speed of sound. So, yeah, speeds that you expect from an airplane, but in a tube on a track. It's really cool.
Much more efficient than what an airplane could do.
Definitely. So
the efficiency is not a minor issue.
Did you happen to catch? It came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but Hyperloop One was already looking for cities willing to invest in creation of the tracks, and they had a bunch of different cities all over the country submit plans. Did you happen to catch any of those routes?
No, I didn't see that. What I did see is kind of related to that is Musk had tweeted out about getting initial approval for the Boring Company to build their car transport system up the East Coast going between Baltimore and New York. And which is exciting, not nearly as fast or as cool, but still being able to go from New York to Baltimore in, I forget, was it an hour? Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, the 11 different routes, they include everything from Boston to Providence. That was 64 miles. So think about that. You could get there in just under 10 minutes. You could go from Boston to Providence. You have things like Los Angeles to San Diego. It'd take, about 15 minutes to do that. And I think one of the most exciting one was Austin. It would connect Austin, Dallas, Houston, and Colorado, one of the towns in Colorado, and it would take just over an hour to go from like Houston to Colorado. And and you have to think about this, and you go, they're going to be on routes that are as regular as buses are in public transportation. It's not unimaginable to think that you could go from Reno to Las Vegas for lunch. It's a 15-minute or a 20-minute ride, and you end up in a completely different state or different part of a state, it really opens up your commuting, traveling, business. I mean, Hyperloop is just really, really cool.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
that's what we need. And this all came out of, Elon's frustration of building, trains to go between large cities that were the most expensive and the slowest of any that were out there worldwide, that we were beating all of the records in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And he said there's a better way to do this.
Right. And but he
And so,
yeah,
and
go
I
ahead.
just found the tweet he sent out here on July 20th saying that they have verbal government approval for the Boring Company, which is the name of his company to do underground tunnels
Right.
from New York to DC, which would do New York to DC in 29 minutes. New York to DC in 29 minutes. That's a huge deal. One of my guys who work for me here was just talking about how that could really just change the face of a lot of things, because you could commute to work from Baltimore to DC. Like, I mean, instead of driving 6 hours, it's 29 minutes.
No, yeah, it would, this idea of, markets and economies being separate. Think about if everyone said, oh, Paco's Tacos down in Austin, they make the best lunch. And even though we live in Houston, Texas, everyone commutes to Austin for lunch and then comes back. Like, money starts to really spread out then, because it's not little pockets of commerce. Now, again, the world is much closer thanks to ideas like this.
That's absolutely right. The world just keeps getting smaller and smaller.
It can get weird, but it's I think that's why we like talking about Elon Musk on the show so much, is that you can talk about so many other technological innovations, but they're like Apple. We're going to talk about their iPhone rumors later. Like, that's in your phone. Like, the new iPhone 8 doesn't give me hope for the future. Hyperloop does. Like, I don't know. Elon just seems to be, just seems to make the future so exciting, and everyone else is just like, okay. So, all right. So that's Hyperloop 1, and we talked about Model 3, Hyperloop 1, and we have just a minute or two to get or to start a new topic. So, did you have one that really stuck out to you, or any?
Gee, I don't know. It's so much pressure for just a minute.
I mean, we could talk about the Microsoft Paint. We touched lately on that, but I think the last time I left it, though, was Microsoft Paint was to be killed off. And like, the outpouring of support for an inanimate object, for a service that has, dozens of competitors, dozens of replacements. I mean,
it's hard to even think of a piece of software as a competitor to Microsoft Paint. Other applications are not even in the same world as Microsoft Paint.
It does seem to be like Microsoft Paint was like the shovel, and it's like you go onto a work site and say, everyone, we're replacing shovels, or we're getting rid of shovels. Like, it was so basic, so easy, so simple. But I mean, there are like GIMP and obviously to the higher extent like Photoshop and Illustrator. But there are competitors. What did you think about, first of all, Microsoft killing off Paint, and second of all, the outpouring of support for not killing off Paint?
I would be interested to see the statistics of how many people have actually used Paint in the last 5 years. I know I haven't, and I don't think I'm unique in that. So I can totally understand not wanting to focus developer time on it. But it's just such a funny thing, and it's something that so many people have good memories of growing up and messing around in Paint and drawing pictures when you were supposed to be working at school. So I'm not surprised to have people have a lot of connection with that and feel that it's a piece of them. They're getting old now.
Who didn't go into Paint and take the spray tool, bump it up all the way, and make their own Jackson Pollock at school, because you were bored? I mean, certainly, but I feel like they could have gone the way of Solitaire in Windows, where they actually did this, and we're about to go to break. But I remember in Solitaire in Windows 8 and 8.1, they actually made it. You actually had to pay for it. It was an application that you had to pay $3 for. And no one really cared. And then someone somewhere came out with the headline, Microsoft removed Solitaire from the Windows operating system, and everyone freaked out. Like, I feel like they could have done it surreptitiously, and no one would have really noticed, but it was a good headline and it was good to hear about. So, all right, we might come back to Microsoft Paint. We might move on to something a little bit more interesting, but everyone, music means we have to take a break. We are here with Mike Cermak, techguide.org. Check it out. And yeah, we'll be back with more Computer America just after this.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. We are 31 minutes past the hour. We are continuing on with Mike Cermak. And Mike, thank you for continuing on with us. And I definitely do like how in the article that you linked to us, this coming from the Huffington Post, I'm sure that the author made a little tombstone with rest in peace Microsoft Paint in Microsoft Paint. So nice little cheeky thing there. But yeah, the long story, the long and skinny of the story was Microsoft Paint. You're right. Microsoft saw it as something that was redundant. I believe they have another application coming out or already out. And it's called like Microsoft's, something or other. Like they had another program that could do what this one did and more. So they didn't want to continue development on it, and it was slated for at least being not actively developed anymore. And then people kind of went bananas. So I mean, was there anything more to the story, or was it just something kind of cheeky and people's reaction to it?
Cheeky. I think just a nice little thing for people to remember what Microsoft Paint was and play with it one last time before it goes the way of the dinosaur. It's just,
right.
I'm not at all surprised that it's going away, but I think that some people will be.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some quote here about the inexorable march of time or something like that. But the other program was Paint 3D, by the way.
That's right. Yeah, Paint 3D is the replacement for it, which is not, yeah. Anyhow, so people will just be making stupid pictures in Paint 3D now instead of Paint.
Right. And really, I mean, the only application I've ever seen Paint used for was goofing off and for cropping and rotating photos. Like that was it. And there were probably better ways to do that.
And it's not particularly good at that.
Right. There's probably better ways to do that. So there you have it. All right. So moving on to some of our other stories here, and we do have a number of them. Why don't I pick out the Game of Thrones hack was pretty good, but why don't we move on to just real quick, and this one because I wanted to relate to our listeners a little bit, because yes, this happened at probably the most unsafest, like if you're a computer, this convention is probably the worst place in the world for you to be at, and it's called DEF CON. It is a hacking convention. It is where hackers go to talk and experiment and discuss what they've been doing in the hacking world. Like seriously, if you are a hard drive, it is the end. It is the end game for you. So they found these things, and I didn't even know they did this. Mike, I don't know if you even heard about this, but they sold old U.S. voting computers on eBay. Like I guess that's the best way to liquidate, old.
Well, what else do you do with government surplus?
Yeah, I guess so. They had these old these old voting machines. I believe they were from like 2004 or 2008, something like that. They were definitely decommissioned, or so they thought. And they were sent to DEF CON for people to hack and to show holes in the U.S. voting system. At least in voting machines, because yes, these things are old, but at the same time, the nation kind of relied on them about a decade ago. Like they were, the fundamental part of our democracy, as I've heard so many times on the news lately. That's being able to hack these things just shows how important things like paper backups are and things like that. So here we have it, and out pops 654,517 people from Shelby County, Tennessee.
Whoops.
Yeah, so I can only imagine that these things were improperly wiped. The hard drives were still, unfortunately, the data was still intact in there somewhere. My question to you is that, how do you think this happened? Because obviously this seems to be, again, this is hacker. Like these are the best of the best, finding very obscure data. But how do you think this happened, and how would an ordinary person wipe their hard drive? Because let's face it, if the U.S. government can't, I mean, where do people mess up in this process? It happens all the time.
Yeah. So in this case, it seems that the data was just stored on a removable memory card that was in the device.
That's not even that's not even like a hack. That's just like stupid.
Right, and that was the thing. And not only was the data just on a memory card that was in the device, but it wasn't encrypted or anything. It was just on there. There was no password or encryption or anything. It really wasn't even a hack. It's kind of shocking how easy it seems that it was for them to get this data off of it. So yeah, what you want to do at the very least, if you're ever getting rid of any old equipment, whether it's a computer or anything that stores data, we even had an interesting article about photocopiers. A lot of photocopiers have hard drives in them, and when they scan in the image to make copies of it, that stuff is stored temporarily, at least on the photocopier. And some bigger ones have real regular computer hard drives in them, and so. There was cases of hackers, buying old copiers from government or healthcare or other industries and going in there and just saying, oh, well, let's see what kind of copies they made. And go back there and look at the old copies. It's stuff you wouldn't even think of. These hackers are just ingenious sometimes to look at that stuff. So you want to be careful of that. You want to wipe it. And to your question about wiping a hard drive, if you have a computer that you're looking to get rid of, you can pull the hard drive out and get rid of it separately and have fun destroying it while wearing safety glasses. There's programs that are designed to actually wipe them as well. I mean, even programs like CCleaner has wiping programs that are built into it. You probably have links on the Computer America website.
Right, yeah.
To software that'll do that.
Mainly it's in the free software section because, paying for stuff is great and definitely support people, but not paying for stuff is also great. So yeah, there's free software out there that will do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and go through there. Use a couple of them if you want. Be extra safe. Do a wipe and then do another wipe. A lot of places for military standards, they'll do a wipe 7 times over, and where it wipes everything that's on the hard drive, writes over it, wipes it again, writes over it, wipes it again, writes over it, and at a certain point, it becomes nearly impossible for someone to go back and recover any of that data. The trouble is people think that they delete something off of their computer and then it's deleted, it's gone, it's destroyed, and that's not the way computer storage works. That's certainly not the way hard drives work. Whenever you delete something off of your computer, it just marks that area of the hard drive as available for use now. So if you don't use that space, if you don't store more information on the computer, it's trivial for a hacker to go in there and recover that information. I mean, it's really very, very simple to do. So
right.
The way to prevent that is just to have that information written on top of and then deleted and written on top of. And the more times that's done, the more difficult it is to go back and see what information was there originally.
So, talk about maybe just a little bit future systems. I mean, obviously this was from a couple of years ago. These have been decommissioned, and while this was certainly a bad thing, I mean, the information again was found at one of the largest hacking events. So this is very public. This is not, 654,000 people were suddenly released into, the public, space, this was found at probably the most secure place you could have private information stolen from. But I mean, for future systems, is this possible to make a system, or do you think that little mistakes, just like, making a copy, forgetting your disk is in there, and bing, bing, boom, you have 650,000 people, names, addresses, party registration, all suddenly, compromised? Is there a way to do this, right? Or is something like this always going to pop up eventually?
Well, no system is foolproof. There's always a weak point, and usually it's the humans. Even with a paper ballot system, it's not entirely secure. It's easy for people to try and abuse that system one way or another. Accidentally not counting some records, or accidentally not delivering them, or accidentally delivering too many of them, or whatever. There's no system that's 100% foolproof. There's a lot of advantages to doing it electronically, and I think it's obviously only a matter of time before we do. But we need to do it carefully, and we need to do it securely. There's plenty of comparisons. Like, we help in my day job, we help companies. We were helping a police station recently go through an audit with their criminal justice requirements in order to maintain their information securely. And all the time we're working with medical offices to reach HIPAA compliance, where they have to store all of your private medical information in a secure way and transmit it in a secure way. And there's procedures for that. There's you have to there's this regulation and this regulation. Here's how you're allowed to store things. Here's how you're allowed to transmit things. And obviously it's not perfect, and oftentimes people will, when there's a problem, it's that someone wasn't following the regulations. The problem with the election is that those sort of requirements haven't been as well thought out, or those requirements don't really exist in the same way. Like, we don't have really easy, really clear HIPAA compliance regulations for elections.
Which is odd.
Varies. Well, it varies really widely, and part of that reason, I believe, is that we've got so many different types of election officials in so many areas. The election, cycle in large part is localized. Whether you go to which election office you go to in your area, it can be very, very different than the one next door. What type of machines they use, how they count it, how they check your ID, how they handle all sorts of things is very different at a local level. And the requirements to have a secure system, all of these local election officials are going to have some way of securing their systems. And that's a lot of overhead for a lot of people who are just volunteers trying to count votes and help people fill out their polls.
Right. And I guess the point that this article was making at the very end was that if information like this was compromised, during the election, or when they were in use, he could have simply went in, marked everyone as saying all 650,000 of these people had already voted using absentee ballots, and thereby nullifying all of these votes. So little things like that could obviously really hurt such kind of election. And to your point, the article also covers how just a couple months ago this year, a thief stole 4 e-poll books from the pickup truck of a poll manager while he was shopping for groceries. So the computer system can be foolproof, can be completely up to speed and all the good stuff, but at the end of the day, a thief can just walk up and steal the books. It's not ideal by any means. So.
Yep, that's right. And you've got such an issue, I think, with it being so controlled at a local level. It's going to be hard to centralize that. Yeah. And there's, and centralizing it has its own issues.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, but fortunately enough, I would hope that there are smarter minds than ours working on this issue going forward. So, all right, I'll leave this up to you, but I'll give you 2 options here. So, Mr. Mike, would you like to talk about iPhone rumors? These are leaks that were supposedly pulled out of the Apple AirPod or HomePod, whatever it's called, of the new Apple iPhone, capabilities to, kind of be compatible with it. So we could either talk about some unverified but pretty juicy rumors, or we could talk about Bitcoin, because I know you've had some interest. We've talked about cryptocurrency on the show before, and they had a pretty big, event happen where Bitcoin and the Bitcoin community essentially split in half, and now we have a new currency that is, over the past couple of days has made, or at least has become, an $8 billion entity. So which one kind of,
We've got to hit iPhone. Everyone's interested in the new
okay.
iPhone.
Of course, always fun. And so, yeah, iPhone. These are this coming from CNET. It's a supposed 8 things we just learned about the iPhone 8, and it was a huge leak. And the article kind of starts out, of course, saying that Apple is not immune from leaks. In fact, it's one of their, it's almost kind of one of their advertising methods. Because take like the iPhone 4, it was left in a bar. They said it
Right.
was one of the employees was field testing it and left it alone. Someone picked it up and, hey, check it out, new iPhone. And they've had a number of different leaks, supposed leaks and things like that. Well, this latest one comes from the firmware update of the HomePod smart speaker. But they found a buried treasure trove, as they called it here, that's within the code that has a number of different features, that kind of say, like device has home button 0 or 1, kind of an odd programming language to put in. So, there's 8 different ones. I believe you have the article. I mean, yeah, let's start knocking these things out one by one. Are you excited? Do you think it's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. So the first one, and they have a diagram here, but I'm not sure where they got the diagram from, but it's the idea that the bezels, and mainly, the side-to-side bezels are probably about as thin as you're going to get them. But the top and the bottom bezels, we've seen this with things like the Samsung phone, I believe.
Right.
They say they're going away. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of difficulty with that. People like the idea of not having a bezel. It looks sexy. It looks cool if the front of your phone is all screen. That it just looks futuristic, and you don't have the ugliness of a frame around your phone, or at the top and bottom having to have a home button and other things. It's difficult to do that in practice because, of course, you usually want a speaker and a camera and sensors and proximity sensors and home buttons and other things on the front of your phone as well. But there's a lot to suggest that Apple is going this way. As you mentioned, other manufacturers are. The main source of this leak is with the animations for Apple Pay, where they show the image of, or the outline of the phone for the Apple Pay use. And there's the old version that's in this firmware update, but also there's a new one, which is a very different iPhone design than what we've seen in the past, where it seems to show a frame around a screen and a very small part at the top, which presumably is where the speaker and proximity sensor and other things are, without a home button, which goes along with what you were mentioning earlier, that there seems to be a indicator of whether or not the device has a home button, a Boolean yes or no, or true and false.
Yeah, that and like you just mentioned, that's number 3, where apparently there's an option for the software to detect if there's a home button, yes or no, which, I mean, the home button was a given for every phone since the first one. I mean, it was the little button at the very bottom, and they've done a lot with it. They've built in the the Apple iTouch sensor into it. It's been, really, other than the power button and the volume up and down button, they're the only buttons that have survived the stripping down of a phone. So, again, number 3, device has home button 0 or 1, obviously meaning yes or no. And yeah, what do you think about this? Because we've seen other features from, again, speaking to Samsung, they have the ability to read fingerprints, but it's like a small sensor on the back of the phone rather than being on the front. We have other devices that can read, your fingerprint on any part of the screen. Do you think that's, and of course we're going to talk about, the Touch ID going away and maybe a camera that scans your face, facial recognition, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about the home button eventually going away? Because I think we all saw it coming. It's just, will the iPhone 8 do it?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see that be the case. It used to be on some of the earlier Android devices, the home button and some of the other buttons that are now a hard button on most Android devices were soft buttons. They were, at the lower part of the screen and were soft buttons instead of hard buttons. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, exactly what they're going to do with Touch ID is interesting to see. Touch ID, of course, is the fingerprint sensor that's built into the home button on many iPhone devices, and it's hard for me to imagine that they're going to get rid of touch, because that is a very convenient, reliable, and relatively secure way of unlocking a phone.
Right.
It's certainly not foolproof. There have been demonstrations of how you can get around it, but it's not trivial to do. You need to get someone's fingerprint and put it in plaster and do this and that, and it's not easy to duplicate. It's certainly possible, but not as easy as, for example, some phones can be unlocked with your face, and that's pretty easy to bypass. And a lot of phones, you show them a picture of the person, and it can't tell that that's a two-dimensional picture and not a three-dimensional person, and it's like, good enough. There's their Facebook profile. Let's open it up. And so as a result, some phones and devices went to the next step and said, okay, I see that it's you, now blink. To try and make it even more difficult for people just holding up a picture. But then the problem with those sort of sensors is, well, what happens if I'm sitting in a movie theater or a dark area where it can't see my face through that front facing camera? Or what happens if, whatever. It's not as reliable as being able to read a fingerprint quickly and accurately.
Right.
So I'd be surprised if they were to get rid of Touch ID entirely. I would not be surprised if they just moved it to the back.
Yeah, and again, that's something that we've certainly seen before. And putting a little sensor, somewhere on the phone that can detect your finger, because obviously, if the home button is going away, hey, for all we know, they could have an area, like they could have the entire screen be Touch ID compatible. It wouldn't just be, the home button. So, hey, it could certainly happen. And one of the points that we skipped over was the idea of facial recognition, being able to open up your iPhone using the camera. And, this article here has it called Pearl ID. So maybe a working title, but very top of the screen. Oh, uh-oh. Okay, sorry everyone. We accidentally lost Michael Cermak, so we're gonna call him back. One moment. Get him back. Mike, can you hear me?
I can now.
Yeah. Wow, that broke up there for a minute.
Technology.
Yeah.
See, Apple discovered that we were talking about their secrets and just
shut it down.
Us right
shut it down. Yeah. They have a button that just shuts down anyone and everyone. It's just a big wall and big red buttons. But no. So we're moving on. Status bar may never be the same. So it said the very top of the screen is bisected by the camera, and I don't know. Status bars I really don't care about. That obviously, if the physical aspects of the phone change, then the software has to change as well. So that's not really surprising to me.
Right.
So they say that Apple's augmented reality seems to get a boost. So here's my question to you: augmented reality, virtual reality, blah blah blah. They've been phones have a limited capability so far with virtual reality. Like you could buy little headsets for them. But do you think Apple is going to start making the move towards, Pokemon Go style augmented reality on phones? Kind of make it a feature instead of something that they leave up to app developers, because there's obviously a lot of potential there. It's just, do you think Apple really cares to capitalize on the idea of building AR into their devices?
I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. I mean, there's a lot that can be done with augmented reality, and clearly there's some apps that are beginning to take advantage of it. But the more that can be baked into the device, the more likely you're going to see developers use it.
Like I could potentially see it where, of course, using the rear-facing camera, maybe going throughout your house and maybe tagging locations or items, potentially sending that to friends. So like, let's say you want your friend to go up to your house and pick something up off your table. You could, kind of tag it and send it to them and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think there's ideas. It's just, I'm not really sure. And again, this coming from the source code, so there's a little bit to back it up. But, I think Apple's probably going to leave that to developers more than to themselves, because I don't know, just doesn't seem like Apple's
It surprises me a bit, and I haven't seen much to suggest that this is going to change, that Apple hasn't gone into the VR world a little bit more. You've got Samsung that's getting into it pretty hard with the Samsung Gear VR and things like that. It would not surprise me for Apple to come up with some sort of VR accessory to go with the new iPhone.
they only have, $78 billion to play with, and they've been working on that Apple Watch for so long. It's hard to shift gears, I guess, to, go from Apple Watch to VR. But no, these fields are certainly developing, and I think augmented reality, if not virtual reality, could have a very real place. And, if Apple doesn't really seem to be making itself stand out in the hardware market anymore, that's kind of what made the iPhone stand out. I personally hope that they stand out in the software side, augmented reality or virtual reality. So I hope that's where Apple innovates. All right, so with that being said, let's see, number 7, a little bit of evidence for wireless charging, where I believe it's like one new sound file or something like that buried within iOS 11. Wireless charging. I heard a report about that. I think I was listening to like NPR or something like that. But they said that even people who, sprung for inductive charging, bought the pad, blah, 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 they found it so inconvenient because it didn't do it as fast as, other, just plugging your phone in, that a lot of people who purchased inductive charging phones and the pads and blah, 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 it didn't stick. The idea of just plugging your phone in is so much easier, faster, and it's going to get a charge. So my question to you is, what do you think about inductive charging, and do you think Apple's really going to mess with it at this point? Because they might be able to get, they might be able to make it catch on, but it hasn't caught on in its own right.
Yeah, part of the reason there's a standardization for inductive charging called QI, and as you said, it's very slow, and so as a result, it hasn't really caught on. But some, products are starting to use their own. Samsung, in fact, as I sit here, my Samsung device is sitting on an inductive charger and charging pretty quickly, because it's using their own standard instead of the QI standard that had been around for years. If Apple's going to do inductive charging, that's what they're going to do, and it'll be shocking, that it'll be their own system rather than one that's compatible with other phones. They're going to have it be only compatible with Apple devices, but for good reason in this case.
Right, and obviously they have a lot of different devices that they could spread this out to. I mean, a lot of what makes Apple is mobile. Their phones, their watches. I'm sure things like mice and keyboard would certainly benefit from being inductive charged and things like that. I mean, there's a lot to say that they could, but I don't know. It's one of those things that people are like, "Wow, this is so futuristic! You cut the power cord. Congratulations, everyone!" But they just never do.
I'm
it.
surprised that they haven't done it already, but I will also say there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that they will be doing it in 8. I mean, we've got, the article mentions there's a new sound file and perhaps a new icon for charging. Maybe that's for wireless charging. Maybe it's not. We just don't have much to go on yet.
Or maybe it's some cheeky software designer just throwing that in there just to throw off breadcrumbs. So the last rumor, and this I can't imagine is much of a rumor, is that iPhone is looking to mix it up a bit, because for the longest time we've had the iPhone 7, 7S.
I think I lost you again, Ben.
90 seconds.
Might have lost us a little bit. So, wow. Yeah, sorry, we're having connection problems here. But Mike, if you can hear me, thank you so much. And everyone, be sure to check out techguy.org. We have all that and more, and a great place to find tech support and more. So, Mike, thank you for joining us. All right, yeah. So again, everyone, the unfortunate connection problems.